All right, here we are. Kinesiology 230, Chapter 14, Cardiovascular Exercise Technique. This is presentation 2 of 2. We're only doing 2 of them for this chapter, and they talk about exercise techniques now for non-machines. In the last presentation, we talked a lot about different machines, different things that you can do, step mills, ellipticals, treadmills, etc., rowing machines. But for this, the book lists, 4 main exercises. Walking, there's really not much there, so I'm not going to focus too much time on that. But we're left with running, swimming, and group exercise classes, and we're really going to just kind of rip through this in a short order. Let's go into this. So generally speaking, when you have clients who can walk 3 to 4 miles an hour without becoming fatigued, they can start a run, walk, or walk-run program. And that walk-run program is a discontinuous exercise protocol where they may walk a little bit for a warm up, then they actually run for a minute or two, then they'll walk for a minute or two, and run for a minute or two, and then you change the actual walk, run ratios where they might be running for 3 minutes and walking for 1, running for 4 minutes, walking for 1, and eventually you get to the point where they can just run for 15 minutes or 20 minutes straight. So the idea is you're trying to progress your clients, but the thing is they have to be able to walk 3 or 4 miles in an hour, meaning walk at a rate that's 3 to 4 miles per hour, if I can just take the verbiage and mix it up a little bit, they can then start a program such as that. Now, the thing is, I will point out, when you take people from walking programs into more running-oriented programs, I'm going to put myself up here, there's going to be a change of the impact forces that they'll experience on the body. Because they're running, there's a little bit of a flight phase. It's not like sprinting where there's a full flight phase. But walking, when you actually walk, we have, at some point, we have both feet are in contact with the ground. Whereas with sprinting, there's a flight phase with 1 foot hitting the ground, never 2. With jogging, there's a flight phase, but it's a much shorter flight phase, and the ground reactive forces are way different. But the point I want to make is when you have people who might be obese or they might have orthopedic concerns, you need to be able to program this out where you're not basically blowing your people out of the water. And go back to the example we had in the last presentation regarding the, think back to the showing wear, on the shoes. And that wear and tear that's shown on the shoes kind of gives you a tell in terms of what the heck is going on with the person and how they run and their actual ankle position, internal, external rotation, are they inverted, are they everted? When you look at this and they start performing running activity, those forces get magnified so much that it can cause other problems as a result. All right, let's continue. All right, so with running, they elaborate a little bit regarding foot contact while running. Very much what they're talking about is recreational running here. We're not talking sprinting or running like 400 meters or 200 meters as conditioning protocol. And I can tell you as somebody who has coached speed, agility, quickness, and acceleration and sprint mechanics, over the course of my career, mechanics matter. It matters for a reason. You work so dang hard in the gym to get stronger, et cetera. And then what we do is we do speed agility drills and we do technique drills to be able to run more efficiently. So all the work that you have in the gym is actually most efficiently applied into the ground and you get the most out of the ground. But and it's a yield game, right? You want to get as much out of the ground as possible in terms of equal and opposite reaction as per Newton. But it comes down to some really simple math when it comes down to it. It's stride length times stride frequency. How long are their strides, and then how fast are they turning their strides over? In terms of stride length, oftentimes your clients, in a desire to run faster, will do so and they'll overstride. And one of the ways you can just ask your client how they're feeling while they're running, if they feel like their toes are slamming into their shoes while they're running, they're probably overstriding, meaning like the toes are slamming into the front part of the shoe. That's called the toe box. And what's happening is they're getting a braking effect because the foot strike is too far out in front. It needs to be a little bit more underneath it, but that's a technique you can work with your clients. But this is something where the book goes into great detail, and you see this in a quiz question later on in a test, Specifically, the heel touches the ground first and the body weight is spread through the foot with a gentle rolling action. And I can tell you, if you're a sprinter, you're a competitive runner, it ain't like that. It's going to be a little bit different animal, and you probably aren't thinking too much about gentle rolling action. But for the sake of recreational running, that's exactly what you're looking for, and what you're looking for on your quiz question. They do make the point to note the difference between overstriding and understriding, but I think it's pretty common sense. I think in terms of overstriding, it's too long of a stride, and understriding, it's a little bit too short, like little choppy steps, like their shoelaces are tied together. You'll probably want to commit that to memory just for sake of understanding more about that with your client, but I don't think you see that anywhere else. They do jump into swimming per se. They talk about 4 main strokes of swimming: the crawl, the backstroke, the breaststroke, and the butterfly. For most people, they'll perform the crawl, and the book focuses on that. And with the crawl, they focus on the arm stroke, the leg kick, and the actual breathing that goes into performing that activity. And the front crawl, also known as the front stroke, it's the most popular and fastest stroke. It's the easiest to learn. And since it uses both the upper and lower body, because you're kicking as you're swimming with the upper body and you're crawling basically, you have to have proper coordination because it's contralateral. As you swim and bring the hand into the water, theoretically your legs should be kicking. And depending if you're more of a flutter kicker as opposed to a longer stride kicker, you might have a 2-to-1 ratio, or you might be 1-to-1. It just depends on your style. But long story short, you have to have good coordination, and it also taxes the cardiovascular system to a high level. It's very forgiving on the joints. And I will say this about, let me go back to the swimming. I would also urge you to maybe take your clients into the pool to perhaps do like running drills in the pool. And I mentioned it in that one exercise where I was demonstrating the single leg hamstring dynamic flexibility. When you do those in the pool, you have the buoyancy of the water. It's more forgiving on the joints, but you also have the viscosity of the water adding resistance to the equation, and it forces the person to work just a little bit harder as you push through water. So I would highly recommend that you do that with your clients. Okay, so group exercise classes. Among the big benefit is like you have this accountability through camaraderie with the other people in the group, which is great. And the thing is with the group exercise classes, it's the leadership that really sells the group. If you have a lousy instructor, you won't have anybody doing the class. So, you have this kind of dynamic where people are codependent upon the instructor and codependent upon each other to be able to show up, and they have this camaraderie of like, yes, we've completed this class yet again. Nice job, way to go. But they list several formats. They list more traditional, and they have step, kickboxing, and aquatics. And with traditional classes, they list a couple of these, and there's different formats that you'll find in health clubs, and some are like a suite of products where they have a strength training class, a cycle class, and they may have like an attack class, which is a punching, boxing type class, but they're all provided by one company that makes the soundtracks for the class, that they put together all the music and they put together choreography, and you go do quarterly educational or quarterly learning modules for these courses, and you implement those back into your class. I mean, there's many different formats, but that's certainly one of them. I will tell you, when you start talking about group exercise classes, you'll be able to, if you're in this industry, you might have your core personal training, fitness related certification, but you also might have perhaps something that's in Les Mills suite of products. You might have a yoga or Pilates certification. You might have a certification that's specific to TRX, whatever it may be. And you end up maybe having a certification in cycle. So you end up becoming less dependent upon just a personal training, and you have these different things that you do as an instructor. But I will tell you that you have to be able to be a bit of a chameleon, because you have to be able to accommodate all these different people in a group as opposed to the one person that's in front of you when you're doing personal training. I will let you go on out and go ahead and feel free to read through these in the book. I can tell you there's really not a lot to parse through, and there's really not a lot that you're going to be held accountable for, but maybe take a moment just to kind of look through these, and it might spark some curiosity in some other areas you might be interested in terms of fitness related training. All right, guys, signing off. I got to go write you an exam.